At 56 years old, Phil Mickelson has spent 3 decades making powerful people uncomfortable. Hot mics, press conferences, leaked text messages that cost him sponsors. But what reportedly left his phone this week isn't a quote about course setup or a jab at a rival. It's a recording, and the voice on it belongs to the man who has run professional golf since 2017. Now, I'm not talking about a rumor from some anonymous account. Multiple sources inside the tour are pointing to the same conversation. A private exchange, recorded without his knowledge. The subject? A financial arrangement that was supposed to merge $2 billion entities into one. A deal fans were told would save the sport. Here's what should make every golf fan stop and think. The word 2027 keeps surfacing in connection with this recording. That's not a random year. That's a deadline. A financial cliff buried in fine print nobody outside the boardroom has seen. Contracts were quietly rewritten. Board seats were reshuffled. And the players who will feel the impact first? They still don't know it's coming. Not one of them was briefed. Not one agent was consulted. The decision was made above their heads, and the man who made it is preparing to walk away. My honest take: the commissioner built the merger narrative to protect TV deals, not the players. If you disagree, tell me why in the comments. If you want the truth before mainstream outlets sanitize it, hit subscribe. We don't do corporate spin here, but the recording itself is only half the story. What was said in that room reveals who is really paying the price when the 2027 deadline hits. Paying the price. That's the phrase bouncing around locker rooms right now, and it's not about one player missing a cut. It's about an entire generation of golfers who were promised stability in exchange for loyalty. Jay Monahan gave them that promise. And now, with his contract expiring at the end of 2026, he's walking away before the bill comes due. Think about the timing. Monahan announced his departure while the PIF negotiations were still unresolved. Brian Rolapp steps into the commissioner's office with no completed framework, no finalized Saudi deal, and a locker room that doesn't trust the front office. That's not a transition. That's an abandonment. Every player who stayed loyal to the tour during the LIV war is now asking the same question. What exactly did Monahan commit to behind closed doors? And why did he wait until his contract was already expiring to let anyone find out? The answer to that question is buried in the recording, and it doesn't paint a flattering picture. The 2023 framework agreement was supposed to be done by December of that year. Fans remember the press conference, the handshake photos, the language about unity, and the best players competing together. None of it materialized. Not one binding contract was signed. Monahan kept telling players the deal was close, month after month. Season after season. Those monthly assurances weren't just optimistic. According to sources close to the policy board, they were scripted, word for word. The same talking points delivered to different player groups on different continents. And the man who wrote them is no longer on Monahan's side. What makes this harder to swallow is the silence. During those same months, players who asked direct questions about the merger timeline were told to trust the process, told that leadership had a plan, told that asking too many questions would hurt the tour's negotiating position. So they stayed quiet. They played their events. They smiled at press conferences. And all the while, the decisions that would define their financial futures were being made in rooms they weren't allowed to enter. One veteran, a Ryder Cupper who stayed through the entire LIV war, reportedly told his agent after a player meeting last fall that he felt like a caddy, being told the bag was lighter than it actually was. He carried the weight. He trusted the numbers. And now he's finding out the numbers were fabricated. That sentiment is spreading. Not loudly, not publicly, but in group chats, in phone calls between agents, in quiet conversations at the practice range where nobody from the front office is listening. The trust isn't broken, it's evaporated. And the policy board members who approved those votes, they're not talking. Not one of them has issued a statement. Not one has clarified what they understood when they raised their hands. Because if they admit they didn't understand the fine print, they look incompetent. If they admit they understood it and voted yes anyway, they look complicit, so they stay silent. They let Monahan walk out the door with his reputation intact, and they let the players carry the weight of a decision made by men who couldn't bring themselves to read the terms. Behind those scripted updates, Monahan was making moves that would outlast his tenure. Financial commitments, structural changes, the kind of decisions that don't make headlines, but determine whether a veteran keeps his pension or a rookie gets his travel stipend. Players weren't briefed. Agents weren't consulted. The policy board voted, but several members later admitted they didn't fully understand what they were approving. One source described the meeting as a room full of men signing a check they couldn't read, and the person holding the pen wasn't asking for permission. He was asking for signatures. That check is dated 2027, and the man who signed it just handed the pen to someone else. Someone else. That's the part nobody is talking about. Because the person inheriting Monahan's desk isn't just walking into a new job, he's walking into a minefield where every step could detonate a financial obligation the previous administration never disclosed. And the only man who knows where all the mines are buried? He's 56 years old, he plays golf on a rival tour, and he just made the most dangerous phone call of his career. Phil Mickelson didn't leak this recording out of loyalty to the PGA Tour. Let's be clear about that. Phil has spent 4 years at war with the tour's leadership. He called them an oligarchy. He jumped to LIV. He burned every bridge he could find. So why would he suddenly protect the institution that tried to end his career? He wouldn't. And that's exactly why this recording matters. Phil isn't leaking it to save the tour. He's leaking it because the recording proves something that affects him personally. Something financial. Something that was supposed to stay buried until after Monahan walked out the door for the last time. Here's the context most outlets are missing. Phil is currently entangled in his own legal mess, a separate investigation, a different leaked audio. The Sable offshore situation, where Phil allegedly received non-public financial information through recorded calls and group messages. That scandal made Phil hyper-aware of what a recording can do to a person's life. He knows what it feels like to have your private words weaponized. He also knows what it feels like to be the one holding the weapon. This isn't the first time Phil has decided that the only way to change a system is to break it open from the inside. In 2022, he told a reporter the PGA Tour was an oligarchy and got ostracized for it. In 2023, he joined LIV and became the face of the rebellion. In 2024, he watched the tour scramble to respond and said nothing. Phil doesn't act out of anger. He acts out of calculation. Every move he makes is timed. Every word he releases is measured. And this recording? This is the most calculated move he has made since he walked away from the tour that built him. But here's the risk Phil is accepting by releasing this tape. The Sable offshore investigation is still active. Federal regulators are still reviewing the audio and group messages from that case. If Phil's involvement in releasing the Monahan recording draws additional scrutiny to his own communications, the legal exposure multiplies. One investigation becomes two. Two becomes a pattern. And a pattern is what prosecutors use to build cases. Phil knows this, his lawyers know this, and he released the file anyway. That tells you how angry he is, or how certain he is that the truth will protect him. Phil isn't the whistleblower here. He's the man who knows exactly what a recording costs, and he chose to pay that price anyway. That choice didn't happen in a vacuum. To understand why Phil would risk his own legal exposure to release this tape, you have to look at what the recording actually threatens. It's not about embarrassing Monahan. It's not about settling a personal score. It's about money. Specifically, it's about the money that was supposed to flow from Saudi Arabia into professional golf starting in 2027. Money that players were promised. Money that agents built contract negotiations around. Money that veterans counted on for their retirement. And according to the sources who have heard the recording, that money was never guaranteed. Not even close. The PIF, the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund backing LIV Golf, has been quietly restructuring its investment portfolio since late 2025. New board members, new funding thresholds, new conditions attached to every dollar. The public story was always that Saudi money would flow into golf indefinitely, that the merger would create a unified global tour funded by the deepest pockets in sports. But the internal projections tell a different story. The PIF's commitment to golf was never indefinite. It had an expiration date, and that date is 2027. Monahan knew this. According to the recording, he knew it as early as 2024. He knew the Saudi funding structure had a built-in sunset clause. He knew that after 2027, the PIF would either reduce its investment dramatically or redirect it entirely. And instead of telling the players, instead of letting them prepare, he kept selling the merger narrative, kept promising unity, kept telling everyone the deal was close. Because if the players knew the money had an expiration date, they would have demanded concessions. They would have asked for guarantees. They would have forced Monahan to negotiate from a position of transparency rather than control. Money isn't drying up. It's being redirected. And the loyal players will feel the redirect first. Redirected where? That's the question keeping agents up at night. The PIF doesn't pull money out of a market without putting it somewhere else. And the somewhere else, according to the financial restructuring documents, is a new commercial entity that bypasses the traditional tour structure entirely. Think about what that means. The Saudi money doesn't disappear. It moves. It flows into a new vehicle, a new broadcast strategy, a new tournament series that doesn't require the PGA Tour's permission, its history, or its players. The tour becomes irrelevant, not because it lost the money, because the money found a way around it. Consider what that means for the events players have spent their careers defending. The Canadian Open, the Colonial, the Phoenix Open. These aren't just tournaments. They're institutions with decades of history, community ties, and charitable foundations built around them. If the Saudi money redirects into a new commercial vehicle, those events lose their funding priority. They become second tier. They become the kind of events that get squeezed when budgets tighten. And the players who won them, who built their legacies on those fairways, watch the trophies gather dust while the money flows somewhere else. The broadcast implications alone are staggering. The tour's current television contracts are structured around the assumption of a unified, globally funded product. NBC, CBS, ESPN. Those partners committed billions based on the promise that the best players would compete together every week. If the Saudi money redirects and the product fragments, those contracts become renegotiable. And renegotiable means lower fees, fewer guaranteed events, less exposure for the players who aren't in the top 20. The trickle-down effect hits the rank-and-file golfer hardest. The guy ranked 80 in the world who depends on a full schedule to keep his card. He's the one who loses events first, and Manton let it happen. Or rather, Monahan structured the tour's finances in a way that made the redirect possible. Those policy board votes, those fine print clauses, those broadcast revenue restructuring decisions. They weren't mistakes. They were architecture. Monahan built a system that allowed the Saudi money to exit the traditional tour structure without triggering penalties, without breaching contracts, without giving the players legal standing to object. He built the escape route, and then he announced his retirement. Brian Rolap is about to inherit a war he didn't start, and the enemy already has the blueprint to the building. Rolap walked into the commissioner's office with a resume built on NFL media deals and Sunday football dominance. He was hired to modernize the tour, to build new revenue streams, to make golf relevant in a crowded sports market. What he wasn't hired to do was discover that his predecessor had already sold the foundation out from under him. Rolap's first 90 days weren't spent building. They were spent discovering the sunset clause, discovering the redirect mechanism, discovering that the players he needs to build his new product don't trust him because they don't trust the office he sits in. Two options sit on Rolap's desk. Neither of them is good. Option 1, come clean. Tell the players the Saudi money has an expiration date. Tell them the merger narrative was a holding pattern. Tell them the financial structure Monahan built allows the PIF to walk away at any moment. That's honesty. That's also career suicide. Because the moment those words leave his mouth, player agents start calling rival tours. Sponsors start pulling commitments. The tour's valuation drops, and Rolap becomes the man who killed professional golf. Option 2, stay quiet. Keep the merger narrative alive. Keep telling players the deal is close. Keep the same script Monahan used. Buy another year, maybe 2. Hope that Rolap can build enough new revenue to replace the Saudi money before the 2027 cliff hits. That's the safe play. That's also the play that makes Rolap exactly like Monahan. And the players already know what that looks like. The locker room is already splitting along generational lines. Veterans who remember the pre-live era, who built their careers on the assumption that the tour would always protect them, feel betrayed. They stayed when LIV offered guaranteed money. They played through injuries because the schedule demanded it. They trusted the process. Rookies, on the other hand, never had that loyalty to begin with. They entered a fractured sport. They see the tour as a business, not a brotherhood. And when they hear that the business might not have the money to keep its promises, they start looking at their options. That divide is Rolap's real problem, not the Saudis, not Phil. The fact that his locker room no longer speaks the same language. Next week changes everything. The Player Advisory Council meets on Tuesday. 3 broadcast partners have requested private briefings before that meeting. And at least 5 top 30 players have told their agents to hold off on any 2027 scheduling commitments until the financial picture is clarified. Rolap has 7 days to decide whether he walks into that council meeting with the truth or with another script. 7 days to choose between being the man who fixed the system or the man who inherited its lies. And Phil knows it. That's why he released the tape now. Not last month, not next month, now. While the clock is still running. While Rolap still has a choice. Rolap can't save the tour without breaking its oldest promises. And the players are about to find out what happens when a CEO chooses survival over honesty. Chooses survival over honesty. That's the phrase that brings this entire story back to the recording. Because Phil Mickelson didn't leak this tape to expose Monahan, he leaked it to force Rolap's hand. Phil knows Rolap is sitting on the same information Monahan had. Phil knows Rolap is deciding whether to come clean or keep the script going. And Phil decided that the players deserve to hear the truth before Rolap makes that choice. The recording isn't a weapon. It's a deadline. It's Phil saying, "You have one window to tell the truth, and I'm making sure you can't pretend you didn't know. So here's what's on the tape." The recording captures Monahan in a private meeting with 3 senior advisors and 1 PIF liaison. The date is late 2024. The conversation lasts roughly 40 minutes, and in that 40 minutes, Monahan does 3 things that constitute the fraud the title refers to. First, he acknowledges that the PIF funding structure includes a 2027 sunset clause. He says it plainly. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He tells the room that after 2027, the Saudi commitment drops by 60% unless new conditions are met. Second, he instructs his team to continue telling players that the merger is close. He uses the word close specifically. He tells them to keep using it in every player meeting, every agent call, every press conference. Third, he authorizes the policy board vote that restructures broadcast revenue in a way that allows the PIF to redirect funds without player consent. 3 decisions, 1 meeting, all captured on audio. Phil obtained the recording through a source inside that meeting, a source who felt the players deserved to know. Phil sat on it for months. He waited. He watched Monahan announce his retirement. He watched Rolap take over. He watched the same script get recycled. And when he saw Rolap repeating Monahan's talking points word for word in a player meeting last month, Phil made his decision. He sent the file to 3 journalists. He sent it to 2 player agents, and he posted a single line on his social media. The truth has an expiration date, so does patience. What Monahan said in that room wasn't a prediction, it was a confession, and Phil just made sure nobody can bury it. Nobody can bury it. That's the reality the PGA Tour is waking up to this morning. Monahan is gone. His contract expires in 4 months. He can't be fired. He can't be suspended. He can't be held accountable by the institution he led for 9 years. He walks away clean. Rolap is left holding the tape, the truth, and a locker room full of players who now know they were sold a future that doesn't exist. And Phil goes back to playing golf on a rival tour, knowing he just dropped a grenade into the building that once tried to ban him. The immediate fallout is already visible. 2 broadcast partners have requested emergency briefings with Rolap's office. 3 top 20 players have instructed their agents to review their tour commitments for 2027. And the Player Advisory Council, which was supposed to meet next month, has moved its session up by 2 weeks. Nobody is using the word fraud publicly. Not yet, but in private, that word is being whispered in every conversation that matters, and the longer Rolap waits to address it, the louder the whispers get. Here's the part that should worry every fan watching from the outside. The tour's legal team is already reviewing whether the recording was obtained lawfully. If they can challenge its authenticity or its chain of custody, they can suppress it. They can make it disappear from the news cycle. They can force Phil into a legal fight that distracts from the content and redirects attention to the method. That's the play every institution makes when the truth is inconvenient. Attack the messenger, question the tape, buy time. And time is the one thing Rolap doesn't have, because every day he spends fighting the recording's legitimacy is a day he isn't fixing the problem it exposed. The players are the ones who pay. That's always how it works. The executives make the deals, the players make the sacrifices, and when the deals collapse, the players are the ones standing in the wreckage holding contracts that reference money that was never actually there. The veterans who turned down LIV offers because they were told the merger was coming. The rookies who signed multi-year deals assuming Saudi funding would keep purses inflated. The agents who built entire career plans around a unified tour that was never actually going to exist. All of them were sold a story, and the man who sold it is already packing his office. This isn't about one recording. This isn't about one commissioner. This is about a system that treats players like inventory, assets to be managed, moved, and monetized. And the moment those assets become inconvenient, the system moves on. Monahan moved on. The PIF is moving on. The only people who can't move on are the ones who dedicated their lives to a sport that just sold their futures without asking permission. If you think the players deserve a seat at the table before the next deal gets signed, say it in the comments, and hit subscribe if you want this channel to keep digging when the mainstream outlets look away.